One day I found myself 100 feet underground, miserable. It's a horrible job.
As bombas nucleares são consideradas como as armas mais perigosas do mundo, pois um simples botão pode acabar com milhares de vidas num piscar de olhos. O conhecimento de como elas são produzidas e onde são armazenadas é realmente um arquivo extra confidencial. Pelo menos era isso que eu pensava, até que essa gente da CIA reformado decidiu abrir a boca.
When I was a nuclear missile officer, you sit in a launch control capsule, an LCC, that sits 100 feet underground. And you sit there on a 72-hour shift with one other person, the other person who holds the other key. And then you are one nuclear crew of maybe 30 different nuclear crews who are all on deployment at the same time. And your whole job is just to sit there and wait for nuclear war to break out. Even right now, as you and I are having this conversation, there are some 200 Americans sitting underground doing that exact job. And that's just in the United States.
Mas, alguma vez pelo menos já te passou pela cabeça como os Estados Unidos da América controlam suas bombas nucleares? Basta mesmo apenas um telefonema para lançar os seus poderosos mísseis como vemos nos filmes? André Bustamanté é um oficial reformado da CIA, que usa as suas habilidades de espião treinados pela própria CIA para ensinar qualquer pessoa a dominar a sua mente e conseguir sucesso na vida e nos negócios. No nosso último episódio falamos sobre a técnica secreta que os espiões da CIA usam para detectar indivíduos sociopatas. Desta vez, vamos aprender sobre como os Estados Unidos da América controlam suas próprias bombas nucleares. Vamos lá.
Is that when we are recruited into intelligence service, specifically when CIA recruits field operators, it's fairly transparent. They tell you that you were recruited because you are a little fucked up. They tell you that you were recruited because of a certain psychological profile that makes it so that you pragmatically view things like secrets and lies. There's a few different terms. We call it moral flexibility. Depending on the situation, there are some things that I would deem immoral, but to do them in a different situation is totally acceptable. And that's just something that I'm wired to be, that's been wired in me since I was a kid, but CIA understands how to take advantage of that, how to use that in a way that benefits American national security. There's also an element of high performance that comes from being wired a certain way. So there is a tie between childhood trauma and high performance. It's a documented connection, but CIA has learned, as has MI6 and Mossad and all the other intelligence services of the world, they've learned that when you train someone who has just the right amount of childhood trauma high performance, when you get your hands on them at the right time in the right period of their life, they can be trained to become extremely loyal, highly productive field operators that end up spending 30 plus years in service to their nation.
When did they get their hands on you?
They recruited me when I was 27 years old, coming out of the military in 2007. I was looking for whatever the next step was going to be, and that was when I was approached by a CIA recruiter.
I heard that you got a pop-up on your computer screen.
Yeah, back in the day, I was actually applying. I was a nuclear missile officer for the CIA, I was a nuclear missile officer for the Air Force. And a nuclear missile officer in the Air Force controls nuclear ICBMs. So I wore the little ring.
Wait. What's a nuclear ICBM?
So a nuclear ICBM is a nuclear intercontinental ballistic missile. So the large missiles that carry nuclear warheads for mutually assured destruction, nuclear war type of stuff.
So you controlled the nuclear missiles?
I was half of who controlled them. I wore one ring, somebody else wore a different ring, and that was how a nuclear missile got launched.
What does the ring do?
So the ring is a key. On the end of it is a key, and when you get a nuclear code that comes in, the code, you put it into an old school computer system, and the two of you take your key ring and you insert it into the silo operating system, and then you turn in unison. And when you turn in unison, it launches a nuclear weapon.
How did you get yourself to the point in life at 27 years old where you're holding a nuclear key around your neck?
I would love to say it was a series of good decisions, but it wasn't. I did what I was told. That's how I got there. I did what I was told when I was in high school, and I got good grades. And then my mom told me that the best school of all the universities that chose me, the best school I should go to is the Air Force Academy. So then I accepted a full ride scholarship to the United States Air Force Academy, where I did what I was told, and I graduated as a lieutenant. And then I followed what the Air Force told me to do from there. And they told me to learn how to fly, and then they told me that they needed me to work in nuclear and space weapons instead. So then I went to that school and I did well at that school, and I ended up just kind of climbing the ladder. I did what I was told, and then one day I found myself 100 feet underground, miserable. It's a horrible job.
Why?
So in 2007, when I was a nuclear missile officer, you sit in a launch control capsule, an LCC, that sits 100 feet underground. And you sit there on a 72-hour shift with one other person, the other person who holds the other key. And then you are one nuclear crew of maybe 30 different nuclear crews who are all on deployment at the same time. So at any given time, in one Air Force base, there's 60-ish people underground for 72 hours at a time. And then in a different missile base, there'll be a different 60 people underground. And your whole job is just to sit there and wait for nuclear war to break out. And obviously nuclear war hasn't broken out, and hopefully it never will break out. So as you sit there underground, not seeing sunlight, and as you sit there in a capsule with one other person that you very rarely ever like, you have a lot of time to reflect on what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? I'm a redundancy of a scenario that we all are working very hard to make sure never happens. Is this a productive life? Like, am I making a difference? Am I leaving a mark in history, sitting here, not launching missiles, waiting for a message to come in that I already know isn't going to lead to nuclear war? It's a very difficult and thankless job that even right now, as you and I are having this conversation, there are some 200 Americans sitting underground doing that exact job. And that's just in the United States. Every country that has nuclear weapons is doing the same thing.
If an order had come in that instructed you to launch a nuclear weapon, would you have done it?
Absolutely. That's what you do. The other thing that's important to understand is we're redundancies of redundancies. So we don't know if an order says to launch nuclear weapons. We just know that an order comes in that says to insert the keys and turn them. And if it's a valid order that comes in, then the machine will let us insert our keys, we will turn our keys, and then the machine will do what the machine does. Sometimes that order that's coming in is saying launch nuclear missiles. Sometimes that order that's coming in is just a drill to make sure that the two people in the capsule turn their keys.
Oh, really? So you never know the difference?
We're just a redundancy of a redundancy, man.
It seems hard to me to understand how someone would stay in that job for a long period of time. So they must have like really high attrition.
They have shockingly low attrition because they do such a good job of psychologically identifying the right people for that job.
Were they scouting you, do you think, from a very early age to eventually go into the CIA?
No, I don't believe so. I think CIA is far too practical to do anything that requires scouting people from a young age. I think what more realistically happened is that they had a very simple algorithm that they had applied to every government website so that when people of a certain profile applied to a job on a government website, then they'd get a flash on their screen, just like I did, that said, hey, we appreciate your application. We'd like to have a different recruiter contact you for a different opportunity.
What were you applying for on that government website when that pop-up came up?
Yeah, I was applying for the Peace Corps. I was trying to get into the US Peace Corps because after spending 2 years underground waiting to launch nuclear missiles, I thought that it'd be great to get out of the Air Force and go do the exact opposite. Kind of like if you've ever had a really bad breakup, you go looking for the exact opposite of the person you just broke up with. That's how I felt.
Faz todo sentido te admitir em seus testes quando você já está psicologicamente preparado desde pequeno com problemas de uma família não saudável. E acho meio injusto, mas eficaz, que eles utilizam essas dores, treinam essas dores e transformam como uma arma para determinarem seus próprios fins. 1000 vezes controlar os seus problemas para que te ajudem a determinar os seus fins ou seu propósito na vida, do que ser controlado por eles e não se tornar nada na vida só porque você está sendo perturbado pelos seus próprios problemas. Afinal de contas, eles te ensinam a dominá-los e não ser dominados por eles. Eu acho isso um ponto positivo nesse contexto e temos muita coisa a aprender com eles por causa disso. Mas enfim, essa é só uma opinião minha. Mas diz aí nos comentários sobre o que você achou desse conteúdo e clique no nosso último episódio caso ainda não tenhas assistido, que está a aparecer aí na tela. Tamo juntos e até breve. Obrigado.